Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Harbinger, watching the screens show death and destruction across the Alterran colonies. The blue-skinned people below were running from explosions that lit up their cities like deadly fireworks. Children screamed as buildings fell around them. Mothers carried babies through smoke-filled streets trying to find safety that did not exist. The Zephyrian Empire had been killing these peaceful people for 3 long months now. What started as a simple invasion had become something much worse. The Zephyrians were not just conquering the Alterran worlds, they were wiping out every man, woman, and child they could find. Morrison watched another transport ship full of refugees get blown apart by Zephyrian plasma cannons. The ship had been clearly marked with medical symbols. It carried no weapons. It posed no threat to anyone. The Zephyrians destroyed it anyway because they enjoyed watching things die. Dr. Amy Collins walked up beside Morrison and shook her head sadly. She had been studying alien life forms for 15 years, but had never seen cruelty like this. The Alterrans were artists and philosophers. They wrote beautiful poetry and created sculptures that could make grown men cry. They had never hurt anyone in their entire history as a species. The Alterrans did not even have real weapons. Their ships were designed for exploration and trade. Their cities had gardens instead of military bases. When the Zephyrians came with their war fleets, the Alterrans tried to surrender immediately. They offered to give the Zephyrians anything they wanted. The Zephyrians accepted the surrender and then started killing anyway. They said they wanted to test new weapons and needed targets that could not fight back. They turned entire cities into testing grounds for different types of death rays and poison gases. Morrison had sent report after report to Admiral Lisa Grant explaining what was happening. Each time he asked for permission to help the dying people below. Each time he got the same answer back. The Galactic Council had declared this a local conflict. Earth was forbidden from getting involved under the Non-Intervention Accords. The Non-Intervention Accords were supposed to prevent big wars between major powers. The idea was that if everyone agreed not to interfere in smaller conflicts, then the galaxy would stay peaceful. What the Accords really did was let bullies like the Zephyrians kill whoever they wanted as long as they called it a local matter. Dr. Collins pulled up data on her tablet showing the latest refugee camps. Families huddled together in makeshift shelters made from torn metal and old cloth. They had no food and no clean water. Disease was spreading quickly through the crowded camps. Even if the Zephyrians stopped bombing them today, many would still die from hunger and sickness. The worst part was watching the older Alterrans try to comfort their children. They would point up at the stars and tell stories about how other civilizations would surely come to help them soon. They believed that somewhere out there good people existed who would not let this continue. They were wrong. The major galactic powers were all too busy making money to care about dying aliens on distant worlds. The Korthak Federation had signed a new mining deal with the Zephyrians just last week. The hegemony of worlds was buying cheap Zephyrian weapons for their own military. Everyone was getting rich while children burned. Morrison walked to his command chair and pulled up the communications logs. Elder Unica, the leader of what remained of the Alterran government, had been sending desperate messages across the galaxy for weeks. She begged anyone who would listen to please help her people. She offered to trade their most valuable art and scientific knowledge for just enough protection to evacuate the civilians. No one answered her calls. The few responses she got were form letters explaining that the Non-Intervention Accords prevented outside involvement in local conflicts. Some of the replies even included advertisements for weapons that the Alterrans could buy to defend themselves with. Weapons they had no money to afford and no idea how to use. Dr. Collins showed Morrison her private research files. She had been analyzing Zephyrian broadcasts and military communications without orders from Earth Command. What she found made Morrison's blood run cold. The Zephyrians were not just testing random weapons on the Alterrans. They were testing specific biotechnology that looked very familiar. The virus samples and genetic targeting systems the Zephyrians were using matched research that had been stolen from an Earth facility 6 months ago. Someone had broken into the Biological Defense Research Center in Colorado and taken files on experimental diseases designed to target specific alien physiologies. At the time, Earth security had assumed it was simple theft for black market sale. Now Dr. Collins was showing Morrison proof that those stolen Earth weapons were being used to commit genocide. The Zephyrians had not just stolen human technology. They were using it to kill innocent people and planning to blame Earth for creating the weapons in the first place. Morrison studied the data for several hours before making his decision. He opened a secure channel to Admiral Grant on the flagship USS Constitution. The communication would take 47 minutes to reach her because of the distance involved, but Morrison could not wait any longer. He recorded his message carefully. Admiral Grant needed to know that Earth was already involved in this war whether they wanted to be or not. The Zephyrians had stolen human weapons and were using them to commit crimes against innocent people. Sooner or later, the galaxy would discover where those weapons came from, and Earth would be blamed for the genocide. Morrison also sent copies of all the refugee camp locations and Zephyrian attack patterns. If Admiral Grant decided to act, she would need good intelligence about enemy positions and civilian locations. Morrison knew he was probably ending his own career by sending unauthorized intelligence reports, but he did not care anymore. As he finished recording his message, Morrison watched another group of Zephyrian ships approach a refugee camp holding 50,000 Alteran civilians. The ships were moving into bombardment position. In a few hours, those 50,000 people would be dead, and there would be nothing left but smoking craters where families once lived. Morrison looked at Dr. Collins and made a decision that would change everything. He was going to suffer a very convenient communication breakdown that would prevent him from receiving any orders to stay away from the combat zone. Sometimes the right thing to do was the thing you were not supposed to do. Admiral Lisa Grant sat in her private office aboard the USS Constitution, staring at the message Captain Morrison had sent from the Outer Rim. The images of dying Alteran children filled her screens while the intelligence reports about stolen Earth weapons lay scattered across her desk. She had been an admiral for 12 years but had never faced a choice this terrible. President Alan Brooks had called her personally just 3 days ago with very clear orders. Earth was not to get involved in the Alteran situation under any circumstances. The Galactic Council would impose severe economic sanctions if Earth violated the non-intervention accords. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 8 years and could not afford to be seen as troublemakers. Grant understood the political reality. Earth needed trade agreements with other worlds to survive. The planet's population had grown to 11 billion people, and they needed resources from across the galaxy to feed everyone. Starting a war with the Zephyrian Empire would make other civilizations nervous about dealing with humans. But the intelligence Morrison had sent changed everything. Commander Rick Taylor knocked on Grant's door and entered with more classified files under his arm. Taylor had been Earth's top intelligence officer for the past 6 years, and his reports were always accurate and detailed. Taylor spread new documents across Grant's desk showing shipping records and communication intercepts. The Zephyrian ambassador to Earth had been very busy over the past few months. He had been meeting secretly with several Earth politicians and business leaders, making deals that nobody was supposed to know about. The ambassador had promised massive trade contracts to any Earth company that stayed quiet about the Alteran situation. He had also threatened to release fake evidence showing that Earth had secretly provided weapons to terrorist groups if the human government tried to interfere with Zephyrian operations. Taylor showed Grant the most disturbing evidence yet. The Zephyrians had been planning this frame job for over a year. They had specifically targeted the Colorado Research Facility because they knew the stolen weapons could be traced back to Earth. Their plan was elegant and cruel at the same time. First, they would use Earth weapons to commit genocide against the Alterans. Then they would leak evidence showing where the weapons came from. The galaxy would blame Earth for creating the tools of genocide, while the Zephyrians would claim they were just using weapons that humans had carelessly allowed to be stolen. Grant realized that Earth's choice was not between war and peace. The choice was between fighting as heroes who saved innocent lives or being destroyed as villains who created weapons of mass murder. The Zephyrians had already made Earth part of this war whether humans wanted to be involved or not. On Earth, Senator Kate Williams was holding secret congressional hearings about the Alteran crisis. She had been trying to get permission for humanitarian intervention for weeks but kept running into political roadblocks. The business lobby was terrified of losing trade deals with the Zephyrian Empire and their allies. Williams had evidence that 3 major Earth corporations were already negotiating weapons contracts with the Zephyrians. The companies claimed they were just selling defensive systems, but Williams knew better. The Zephyrians wanted human shield technology and armor plating so they could protect their ships while they continued bombing defenseless planets. The senator also had recordings of conversations between the Zephyrian ambassador and several Earth politicians. The ambassador had been very clear about his threats. If Earth interfered in any way with Zephyrian expansion, the Empire would release fabricated evidence of human war crimes. They would claim that Earth had been secretly arming rebel groups across the galaxy for years. Williams knew that most galactic civilizations would believe the Zephyrian lies. Humans were still the new kids in the galactic community, and many older species already distrusted them. It would be very easy to convince the galaxy that violent humans were secretly causing problems everywhere. Back on the Constitution, Admiral Grant received another urgent message from Captain Morrison. His reconnaissance ship had detected massive Zephyrian fleet movements heading toward the largest refugee camp in Alteran space. The camp contained over 50,000 civilians, including thousands of children, who had already lost their parents to earlier attacks. The Zephyrian attack force consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and a massive dreadnought called the Worldbreaker. Intelligence reports suggested they planned to test a new type of planet-cracking weapon on the refugee camp. They wanted to see how much damage they could do to a concentrated population center. Morrison estimated that the attack would begin in less than 8 hours. After that, there would be nothing left of the refugee camp except radioactive dust and the memories of 50,000 people who had died for no reason except Zephyrian entertainment. Grant looked at the tactical displays, showing the position of Earth's Third Fleet. Her ships were currently conducting training exercises in a system 2 jumps away from Alteran space. It would take exactly 6 hours to reach the refugee camp if they left immediately and pushed their engines to maximum speed. She thought about her orders from President Brooks and the threats from the Zephyrian ambassador. She thought about trade deals and economic sanctions and all the political consequences of starting a war. Then she looked at the pictures of Alteran children hiding in caves while bombs fell around them. Grant made her decision. She activated the fleet-wide communication system and spoke to every ship captain under her command. She told them about the stolen weapons and the planned frame job. She explained that Earth was already at war whether they admitted it or not. The only question was whether they would fight as heroes or die as scapegoats. She ordered the Third Fleet to begin immediate navigation exercises that would accidentally place them in Alteran space just as the Zephyrian attack began. She sent a carefully worded message to Earth Command, explaining that communication with the Outer Fleet had been lost due to solar interference and that she was unable to recall the ships from their training mission. Grant knew she was probably ending her own career and possibly starting a war that could destroy Earth. But she also knew that sometimes the right thing to do was the thing you were not supposed to do. The galaxy had spent centuries creating rules that let evil people commit genocide as long as they called it a local conflict. Earth had never agreed to those rules, and Admiral Grant was not about to start following them now. She gave the order to jump to hyperspace and watched her fleet disappear into the darkness between stars, racing toward a confrontation that would change the galaxy forever. War Chieftain Voxtal stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, the Worldbreaker, watching the refugee camp grow larger on his main screen. 50,000 Alterans huddled together in makeshift shelters below, waiting to die. They had nowhere to run and no way to fight back. This would be the perfect test for his new planet-cracking weapons. The Zephyrian strike force moved through space like a pack of hungry wolves. 12 heavy cruisers surrounded the massive dreadnought in perfect attack formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The refugee camp below had no defenses at all. Voxtal had been looking forward to this moment for weeks. The Alterans had annoyed him with their constant pleas for mercy and their pathetic attempts at negotiation. Today he would show the galaxy what happened to species that wasted his time with talk of peace and understanding. The war chieftain opened communication channels to all his ship commanders. He wanted them to fire slowly and carefully so they could study how much damage each weapon type caused. This was supposed to be a learning experience as well as an execution. Captain Steve Parker sat in the command chair of the human destroyer USS Defiant, checking his weapon systems one final time. His ship had just dropped out of hyperspace directly between the Zephyrian fleet and the refugee camp below. The Defiant was alone, facing 13 enemy warships that outgunned him by more than 50 to 1. Parker knew he was probably about to die, but he did not care. Behind him were 50,000 innocent people, including children who had done nothing wrong, except being born the wrong species in the wrong place at the wrong time. If his death could buy them even a few more minutes of life, then it would be worth it. The human captain activated his communication systems and broadcast on all frequencies, including emergency channels monitored by news networks across the galaxy. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke the words that would be remembered for generations. "This is the Earth Defense Force. You will not pass." Voxtal stared at his screens in amazement. One primitive human ship had appeared from nowhere and was now threatening his entire battle group. The human vessel was barely larger than a Zephyrian shuttle, and its weapons looked like toys compared to his massive plasma cannons. The war chieftain started laughing. This was even better than he had hoped. He would destroy the human ship first and then use its wreckage as target practice for his planet-cracking weapons. The galaxy would see that Earth was weak and stupid for sending one ship against an entire fleet. Voxtal immediately sent a message to the Galactic Council claiming that Earth had committed an act of unprovoked aggression against peaceful Zephyrian forces. He included fake data showing that his ships had been conducting routine navigation exercises when the human vessel attacked without warning. The war chieftain ordered all his ships to open fire on the Defiant. Plasma beams and missile volleys lit up space as 13 warships concentrated their attack on the single human destroyer. Voxtal expected to see the enemy vessel vaporized in seconds. Instead, the human ship's shields flared bright blue and held against the massive bombardment. The Defiant shook under the assault but continued flying straight toward the Zephyrian formation. Parker had somehow managed to reinforce his shields beyond normal capacity and was absorbing damage that should have destroyed him instantly. But Parker was not just defending himself. As his ship took fire from the Zephyrian fleet, he launched his own attack. Not weapons, but something far more dangerous to enemies who relied on lies and deception to justify their crimes. The human captain transmitted a massive data packet to every news, network, and government communication system in the galaxy. The files contained complete intelligence reports on Zephyrian war crimes, including video footage of civilian massacres, and detailed chemical analysis of the bioweapons being used against Alteran children. The transmission also included evidence of the stolen Earth weapons and the Zephyrian plan to frame humanity for the genocide. Banking records showed payments to corrupt Earth politicians and business leaders. Communication intercepts revealed threats made by Zephyrian diplomats against anyone who tried to stop their expansion. Parker had just destroyed the Zephyrian propaganda campaign with one perfectly timed data burst. Every major civilization in the galaxy now knew the truth about what was really happening in Alteran space. The Zephyrians could no longer hide behind claims of local conflicts and defensive operations. Voxtal screamed orders at his weapons officers to destroy the human ship before it could send any more transmissions. The concentrated fire from his entire fleet was beginning to overload the Defiant's shields. Bright cracks appeared in the energy barrier protecting the small human vessel. Just as the Defiant's shields began to fail, Captain Lucy, Martin's heavy cruiser USS Valiant, dropped out of hyperspace directly behind the Zephyrian formation. The Valiant was 3 times larger than the Defiant and carried weapons that could punch through battleship armor. Martin immediately opened fire on the nearest Zephyrian cruiser, catching them completely off guard. The enemy ship's shields collapsed under the surprise attack, and secondary explosions ripped through their hull. The Zephyrians had been so focused on destroying Parker that they never noticed the second human ship approaching. Before Voxtal could reorganize his fleet, Captain Danny Wilson's USS Ranger appeared on his left flank, followed by the heavy cruiser USS Liberty under Captain Roger Hayes. More human ships continued, materializing out of hyperspace in perfect attack positions surrounding the confused Zephyrian force. Within minutes, the entire Earth Third fleet had arrived in Alteran space. 37 human warships now surrounded the 13 Zephyrian vessels in a formation that tactical experts would later describe as Absolutely perfect. Every enemy ship was caught in crossfire zones with no way to escape. Admiral Lisa Grant's voice echoed across all communication channels as her flagship USS Constitution took position at the center of the human formation. Her words were broadcast live to news networks across the galaxy and would be replayed millions of times in the days that followed. War Chieftain, Voxtal, you are hereby ordered to surrender your vessels and submit to war crimes tribunals. Your genocide ends today. Voxtal looked around at his tactical display showing human ships in every direction. He had gone from having overwhelming superiority to being completely surrounded in less than 5 minutes. The humans had appeared from nowhere with perfect timing and positioning. The war chieftain realized that this had not been a desperate rescue mission thrown together at the last minute. The humans had planned this intervention carefully and executed it with military precision that impressed even veteran Zephyrian officers. Earth had been preparing for this fight long before anyone realized war was coming. Below them on the planet's surface, 50,000 Alteran refugees looked up at the stars where human and Zephyrian ships faced each other in the darkness of space. For the first time in months, they had hoped that someone was finally willing to fight for their lives. War Chieftain Voxtal refused to surrender. The idea of giving up to primitive humans was more than his warrior pride could accept. He had spent his entire life conquering weaker species and had never met an enemy that could match Zephyrian firepower. Today would not be the day he started running from a fight. Voxtal ordered his entire fleet to attack the human ships with everything they had. The Zephyrians had larger vessels and heavier weapons than the humans. Their plasma cannons could melt through most known armor types, and their missile systems could track targets across vast distances. What happened next was not really a battle. It was a lesson in military tactics that shocked every species watching the live broadcasts. The Zephyrians had built their entire military doctrine around overwhelming firepower used against defenseless targets. They had never faced an enemy that shot back with equal skill and determination. The human ships moved like dancers performing a deadly ballet in the vacuum of space. Captain Helen Rodriguez commanded the USS Intrepid, leading a squadron of destroyers in a flanking maneuver that came from textbooks written hundreds of years ago on Earth. The small human ships darted between the larger Zephyrian cruisers. Like sharks attacking whales, Admiral Grant had positioned her fleet perfectly before the shooting started. Every human ship knew exactly where to go and what to do when the Zephyrians opened fire. The Earth vessels moved in coordinated groups that supported each other while keeping the enemy ships separated and confused. Commander Bobby Chen sat at the tactical station aboard the USS Constitution, analyzing enemy movements and predicting their next actions. Chen had been studying Zephyrian combat footage for months along with other human military analysts. They had identified 17 critical weaknesses in Zephyrian ship design and fighting methods. The Zephyrians built their ships to look impressive and carry the biggest possible weapons, but they had never worried much about things like armor placement or engine protection, because they only fought enemies that could not fight back. Their vessels were powerful but also surprisingly fragile when facing real military opposition. Human ships were designed by people who expected their enemies to shoot back. Every Earth vessel had redundant systems and thick armor in all the right places. When Zephyrian plasma beams hit human shields, the energy was absorbed and redirected instead of just burning through the hull. The first Zephyrian cruiser to die was the Bloodfang under Captain Korth Vel. 3 human destroyers led by Captain Rodriguez surrounded the enemy ship and attacked its weakest points simultaneously. The Bloodfang's shields collapsed in less than 2 minutes and secondary explosions tore through its weapon systems. Korth Vel tried to ram his crippled ship into the nearest human vessel, but Captain Frank Thompson of the USS Thunderbolt saw the attack coming. Thompson rolled his ship out of the way and fired a full spread of torpedoes into the Bloodfang's exposed reactor core. The Zephyrian cruiser vanished in a ball of white fire. War Chieftain Voxtal watched his ships dying around him and could not understand what was happening. His forces had superior numbers and firepower, but the humans were winning anyway. Every time he gave an order, the Earthship seemed to know what he was planning before he could execute his plans. The truth was that human military commanders had been preparing for this exact scenario for months. Earth intelligence services had been analyzing every piece of Zephyrian combat data they could find. Human tacticians had run thousands of computer simulations studying how to fight the Zephyrian Empire if war ever became necessary. Captain Steve Parker's destroyer. USS Defiant had been damaged in the initial exchange but was still fighting effectively. Parker coordinated his attacks with Captain Lucy Martin's cruiser USS Valiant to trap a Zephyrian heavy cruiser between their overlapping fire zones. The enemy ship tried to escape, but had nowhere to run. The Zephyrian heavy cruiser Doomhammer lasted 8 minutes against concentrated human firepower. Its captain tried every evasive maneuver in the tactical manual, but the humans anticipated each move and adjusted their attacks accordingly. When the Doomhammer's shields failed, human torpedoes found every weak spot in its armor. Admiral Grant watched the battle unfold from her command chair, feeling both proud and sad at the same time. Her crews were performing brilliantly and saving innocent lives, but she took no joy in killing other sentient beings. The Zephyrians had forced this fight by choosing to commit genocide against defenseless people. The Zephyrian dreadnought Worldbreaker was supposed to be the pride of their fleet. The massive warship carried enough weapons to destroy entire cities and had thick armor that could supposedly stop any known weapon. War Chieftain Voxtal was confident that his flagship could handle anything the primitive humans could throw at it. He was wrong. Captain Danny Wilson's USS Ranger and Captain Roger Hayes's USS Liberty attacked the Worldbreaker from opposite sides while Captain Martin's Valiant provided covering fire. The 3 human ships worked together like parts of a single organism, coordinating their attacks with perfect timing. The Worldbreaker's massive size worked against it in close combat. The dreadnought could not turn quickly enough to track the smaller human ships as they darted around its hull, looking for weak points. Its heavy weapons were designed for long-range bombardment, not close-quarters fighting. Human torpedoes found gaps in the dreadnought's armor that Zephyrian engineers had never bothered to protect properly. The Worldbreaker had been built to intimidate enemies, not to survive against competent opposition. After 12 minutes of concentrated fire, the mighty warship's reactor core went critical. War Chieftain Voxtal died when his command bridge exploded in a shower of metal and flame. His last thought was amazement that primitive humans had destroyed the most powerful ship in the Zephyrian fleet. The Worldbreaker broke apart in a series of massive explosions that lit up the entire star system. The surviving Zephyrian ships tried to retreat, but found their escape routes blocked by human vessels. Captain Thompson's USS Thunderbolt had positioned itself perfectly to intercept fleeing enemies. Other human ships formed a net that caught most of the remaining Zephyrian forces. Just when it seemed the battle was over, sensors detected new contacts jumping into the system. 37 more Zephyrian ships appeared in attack formation, led by the battleship Starbreaker. This was the main Zephyrian battle fleet coming to rescue their advance force. The Zephyrian reinforcements expected to find human wreckage and grateful survivors ready for pickup. Instead, they found Admiral Grant's fleet waiting in perfect ambush formation, with captured Zephyrian ships already secured by human boarding parties. The second battle lasted even less time than the first. The arriving Zephyrian fleet had not prepared for combat, and their ships were caught completely off guard. Human vessels struck from multiple directions using tactics that seemed to come from the future. The Zephyrian flagship Starbreaker tried to rally its forces, but Captain Thompson delivered the killing blow with a perfectly timed torpedo spread that penetrated the enemy ship's command section. The remaining Zephyrian vessels surrendered or fled, carrying news of their defeat back to the Empire.